When you picture a samurai, what do you see? Fierce warriors bound by honor, discipline, and the Bushido code. But what if I told you the true story of the samurai is much darker than the one we've been taught? 'Cause beneath the myth of loyalty and precision lies a darker truth, one of brutal enforcement, political scheming, ritualistic suicide, and a decline soaked in blood. These were not just warriors, these were power players, manipulators, ruthless individuals whose actions shape Japan's history in ways we rarely acknowledge. Stick around for the next few minutes, and we'll uncover the hidden truths about the samurai, how their legacy was far more destructive than heroic. Let's start at the very beginning. The samurai first rose to rank during Japan's feudal era, starting in the 12th century and lasting all the way to the late 1800s. They weren't just military figures. Renowned for their skill with the katana, they also served as landholders and government officials. Their role went far beyond the battlefield. They enforced laws, controlled the masses, and upheld a system built on fear as much as honor. But what was the true cost of their dominance? Introducing Seppuku. A ritual of cutting one's own guts out was apparently one of the most iconic rituals of samurai culture. Now, how did something so brutal get glorified as the ultimate act of honor? Well, to the samurai, this was the ultimate proof of loyalty. It showed just how far a samurai would go to preserve his duty, even if it meant slicing himself open in front of an audience. And get this, seppuku wasn't quick. Historical records, including sources like the National Archives of Japan, claim it had to be slow and painful. It wasn't as simple as a single gesture. The ritual demanded precision and endurance. The pain wasn't just inevitable, the pain was part of the point. And if the samurai was lucky, a trusted companion, the kai-shakunin, would step in to execute him and end the suffering. But here's the thing, it wasn't always voluntary. Many were compelled to do this due to failure, disgrace, or defeat. Female samurai too had their own version of this ritual called the Jigai. Instead of their stomach, it would often be their throat, to preserve honor in the face of shame or defeat. Jigai may have looked different, but according to sources from the Tokyo National Museum, it was born from the same merciless code, no matter your gender. But the samurai's world wasn't just about personal honor. Their power reached far beyond the battlefield, into the daily lives of ordinary people. Which brings us to the real heart of their legacy: control. In Edo, the samurai served as police officers, and given their conduct, what we'd call police brutality today was sadly just another Tuesday in feudal Japan. Uncompromising, unyielding, and unforgiving, it almost feels like keeping people terrorized was their main goal. Why? Well, according to the National Museum of Japanese History, the samurai had the authority to torture, intimidate, and even execute locals without facing any consequences. Enforcing the law may have been one of their key roles, but these laws mostly worked to protect the feudal hierarchy of Japan and their own personal privileges. And then there's the political intrigue. Samurai weren't just warriors. They were deep in the game of power. The culture of betrayal was so deeply rooted in their world that shifting alliances, secret plots, and assassinations weren't just common, they were expected. The samurai often manipulated, schemed, and murdered to secure power for themselves or their lords. And these political assassinations were a result of their many privileges, one of which was the Kiri-Sute Gomen, a legal right that allowed the samurai to kill anyone who insulted or disrespected them. Commoners, rivals, even fellow samurai weren't off limits. But this wasn't a law based on justice. It was a law of status. In fact, if you go through the Japanese National Archives, you'll see that it gave samurai the upper hand in almost any encounter, no matter their rank. Just another brutal reminder of just how untouchable they really were. Thankfully, the centuries-long cycle of violence was sputtering out. With Japan's sudden interest in modernization, kicked off by the Meiji Restoration in 1868, the power of the samurai began to crack for the first time in history. But what exactly was this Meiji Restoration? Well, here's the twist. The new government under Emperor Meiji was actually backed by influential samurai from powerful clans, like Satsuma and Choshu. These weren't naive traditionalists, no. They were sharp, ambitious young men who had studied the West and saw the approaching danger: modernize or be colonized. Because you see, the Western powers were already creeping up on Asia. Britain took India, France took Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. The Dutch controlled Indonesia. Those young men knew Japan, as it was, wouldn't be able to bully its way out of this round. Their motive was power, pure and simple, and a burning desire to secure Japan's future. So they began dismantling the feudal system from the inside out. No more lords, no more vassals. They systematically passed reforms to abolish every samurai privilege in the book. By 1876, they even passed laws forbidding samurai from carrying their katana, the very symbol of their soul. They'd had enough of the whole outdated system, the inherited titles, the pointless rituals, and the obsession with swords. They needed to mirror the New World Order. They introduced a conscript army, turning farmers with guns into the nation's primary fighting force, effectively replacing the elite warrior class with proper training. Why? Because a modern nation-state simply had no room for medieval warriors. And these reformers weren't looking back. They were busy carving out new positions for themselves in government, industry, and a modern military, building a future that had nothing to do with the old hierarchy. Naturally, a lot of the samurai didn't see eye to eye with the reforms. After all, these changes didn't just diminish their power, they felt like a deep humiliation, stripping away a status held for centuries. Unable to adapt, many found themselves struggling, tumbling from prestige into poverty, now stuck in a world they no longer recognized. So, of course, some decided to fight back. The Satsuma Rebellion of 1877, led by the famous Saigo Takamori, was their last desperate stand. And here's the irony. The rebels and the government leaders now crushing them were often from the same clans. But this time, victory belonged to the new imperial army, not the old samurai. And it was the final nail in the coffin. As it turns out, the myth of their legend isn't entirely black and white. Some of those men weren't trying to preserve the samurai at all. They were trying to preserve Japan, and they were perfectly willing to kill off their own class to do it. So, how did the samurai's brutal reality get buried, leaving only the myth of bravery and the so-called Bushido code? The answer lies in how history was rewritten. You see, while the new government set Japan on a modern course, they soon faced a new problem. They needed to build a national identity, a unifying spirit, a soul for the new Japan. And what better symbol than a polished-up version of their own past? Therefore, the samurai's legacy was carefully crafted and romanticized by the very people who had no interest in tarnishing it. If you go digging into historical sources, such as those preserved in the Kyoto National Museum, it'll confirm as much, that most of the samurai's image was in fact crafted by post-samurai society, aka the new ruling elites. They rebranded their history, taking all the ideals of Bushido, loyalty, honor, discipline, and deliberately scrubbing away the parts they knew all too well: the scheming, the brutality, the violence. And this became the perfect tool to promote order and project a sense of unified Japanese strength, both at home and to the prying eyes of the West. It was preserved in art, literature, and film, eventually hammered into the national consciousness as well. Now, here's the real question. Why do we choose to remember the samurai as symbols of honor while conveniently forgetting the brutality, the betrayal, and the bloodshed that define them? What does that say about the stories we choose to believe and the ones we choose to forget? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories that challenge the history we've been taught.